Today we're going to talk about anxiety. And I know, this may make you nervous, but this is something that we have to talk about because, like it or not, all of us deal with this in some way. Welcome to the Mercy Cast, where we are learning the art of compassion through the adversity of life. I am your host, Raleigh Sadler. You're feeling that sense of impending dread when you have to make a decision or do a project at work or address something within a relationship. It's scary. It's this fear of the future. And that's why I'm so excited about my guest today. Today, I'm joined by Becky Keife. She is a best-selling author, speaker, and Bible teacher whose new book, A Verse a Day for the Anxious Soul, 100 Days of Peace for the Calm You Crave, is coming out this week. Becky, welcome to the Mercy Cast.
I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here because oftentimes when we're experiencing anxiety, we think something's wrong with us. And we don't think anyone else is experiencing it just like we are. And so it can be something that we feel shame about. It could be something that we hide from other people and we just fake it till we make it. We pretend that we have it together when ultimately we don't. And spoiler alert, no one else does either. You're writing this book, which is a heavy book. You disclose some information. You're vulnerable in this book. You're very open. Becky, what led you to write this book?
Well, it's exactly what you just said. What you basically just said was a synopsis of what I lived for a really long time. I lived in the isolation and the shame of thinking I'm the only one who feels this way. I'm the only one who struggles. And if I just fill in the blank, I'll be able to fix myself. If I just try harder, if I just pray more, if I just write more things in my gratitude journal, if I just get more sleep and stop eating sugar and get my kids to behave and stop procrastinating on work projects, then I won't deal with this anxiety. That just sent me deeper into a spiral of shame and isolation because doing all of the right things wasn't fixing the very real physical, emotional, chemical things that were happening inside of me. And I finally got to the point where I could no longer pretend I was okay. This was about 11 years ago. I have high functioning anxiety. So I was getting out of bed and I was, cooking the eggs and playing cards with the kids and shuttling to soccer and replying to all the work emails. Yet late at night, I would stand in front of my kitchen sink and my mind was going a million miles an hour. I had this deep sadness, this weight that did not match my circumstances. I'd wake up the next morning and it felt like there was a brick on my chest and I couldn't even breathe. I felt defeated before the day even began. I finally was like, I can no longer pretend that I'm okay. Even if other people think that I have it all together on the outside, I do not. So I finally had to get honest with myself, radically honest with God, and then honest with my husband was the first step to say, I'm not okay. I need support. And I wrote this book because I don't want other people to live in that same isolation for as long as I did. I want to take our struggles out of the darkness of isolation and into the light of shared experience because it's in the light that then we can start experiencing more of the presence of God, more of the peace that He offers, and get the very real practical support that we need. Going to therapy, seeing your doctor, getting those kinds of practical support. So that's where I wrote the book because it's a guide into the presence of God, but also I talk about the reality of anxiety because I don't want anyone to think that they are the only one who struggles.
I love how your personal experience forced you to make a decision. And then in making that decision, you're realizing I can help other people on their journey. And that's why we talk about what we talk about on the Mercy Cast. But I think that is so important. You talk about this isolation, but then this radical acceptance of, well, this is where I'm at. This honesty. That's what you said. You talked about an honesty about your situation. I think we really want to not be honest about what we're facing or feeling or experiencing because it's kind of the equivalent of when you think there's a boogeyman in your room as a kid and you pull the sheets over your head. Like, how are sheets going to protect you? But we have our sheets that we pull over and try to protect us when ultimately they're flimsy at best and everyone else can see it. And I think there's that beautiful thing of saying, this is where I'm at. What led you to that point? Like, how did you know that it was safe to be honest, that it was safe to accept where you were?
Well, I don't know that I felt for certain that it was safe, but I kind of felt like I had no other choice. I cannot keep living like this. But one thing that did really help me, and is another reason why I now feel really passionate about talking publicly about mental health, like the things that I write about in A Verse a Day for the Anxious Soul, and even things that I'm sharing now, like I never in my life would have considered talking about publicly like a decade ago. So this has definitely been a journey. But I'll tell you what, so, probably about 5 years prior to when my anxiety really came to a head, a friend told me about her anxiety. And at the time, I'll be totally honest, I did not resonate with her. Like, I was like, okay. And she even told me about how she was on medication and how she was really struggling. And of course, as a friend, I loved her and I felt compassion for her, but I did not relate with her. I still honestly held some stigmas myself about mental health and mental illness and what that meant and what that meant about our faith and different things like that. Nothing is wasted with the Lord. And so then 5
Right.
years later, when I'm struggling, that memory pops back. And I reached out to that friend who she had moved away, like we weren't in close contact, but I knew she would be that safe place. So I called her up. I said, I need to tell you what I'm going through. And she was the voice that one gave me the courage to speak it out for the first time. And second, then offered the validation of like, yeah, Becky, you're not making this up. It's not just in your head. There is something deeper going on, and you are worthy of getting help and support.
She went first.
That's right.
And I think sometimes we have these vulnerability hangovers or like a fear of a vulnerability hangover. We don't want to say too much. We don't want to be too much. We don't want to put ourselves out there with people because what if we're not accepted? What if they turn away and run? And when we talk to those safe people and say, hey, this is where I'm going, they may not respond, kind of like you in that moment. You weren't there yet. But what she may not have known at the moment was she was sharing ultimately and investing in your future by sharing where she was presently.
That's right.
And I think sometimes when we want to open up to people, we think, oh, well, I'm just doing this to get this off my chest. No, that may not be the purpose. You may be showing a pattern or giving this person an example of what they can do in the future when they're dealing with it. And I love how you said nothing is wasted because that keeps coming up on this podcast. Nothing is wasted. Everything that you're going through has a purpose. It's growing you, it's conforming you to the image of Christ, even if it doesn't make sense. And I love how it was 5 years later when you had this kind of rock bottom epiphany where you're like, wait a minute, can we talk? Because you knew she was safe because you knew she'd been there. As you guys talked about that, did anything else come to mind? She kind of gave you some framework to think through, but what else happened in that conversation?
One thing I remember telling her was one thing that can be really challenging about anxiety. Everyone experiences anxiety different. It's not always going to be apples to apples, but I was telling her the thing that was really confusing for me was that one day or even one moment, I would feel fine. I have good, deep roots in my faith and a wonderful husband and 3 healthy, handsome boys. And, and things are going well. Then one minute I feel like I'm trucking along fine. And the next, it's like I'm spiraling and I'm crying and I've overwhelmed my emotions and I'm having these like coffee jitters, like pulsing adrenaline in my body. Like I want to get out of my skin. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, why can I be fine one minute and not the next? It would feel almost easier if it was just like a steady baseline of like, I'm not okay. But this like teeter totter back and forth was confusing. And so I remember the freedom of just being able to say those words out loud. My friend saying, she kind of gave this description, which still stuck with me to this day of she's like, think of it like a sheep pen. This is going to sound kind of weird, but she goes, think of it like a sheep pen. And there's always going to be activity. There's always going to be some level of anxiety. So think of like the sheep is like your anxiety, like in the pen. And there's some movement and jostling, but when it's in the pen, it's manageable. Once the pen is open, it's going to take a lot more work to get those sheep back in. Once they have scattered out, it's going to take more work to get them back in. And so she's like, sounds like you have tipped to that place in your anxiety where some of the sheep are getting out. But some moments you feel okay, and then others it feels out of your control. And so again, it was like this encouragement, Becky, talk to your doctor. Becky, if you need to go to therapy, if you need to like eradicate things from your schedule, like whatever you need to do to free up more mental and emotional bandwidth to wrangle back those sheep. Because anxiety is always going to be a part of our existence, of living in this chaotic world, but it doesn't have to overwhelm us. And so that was a helpful thing that came from that conversation.
You also talk about when you're dealing with anxiety, you start doing this triage of, okay, like, am I drinking too much caffeine? Have I had too much sugar? You start eliminating all these things. And sometimes that doesn't solve the problem. And I think having that conversation with your friend where she's like, okay, where are the sheep? You let some out. Here are some proven ways you can get those sheep back in the pen so you can understand it so that you can see it soberly. And I love that because she sent you to the people that could help you process. And that's the thing about anxiety, right? Like we talked about it at the beginning of how isolating it is. We think no one else is dealing with this, no one else will understand, or we don't think. We just listen to the anxiety and we accept it as fact. And I think it would be a good moment right now to actually try to define what is anxiety? How would you define anxiety for us? I know it's a complicated thing and that makes me
Mhm.
nervous, but what is it?
Well, I'm really glad that you asked that question because it can be challenging to define anxiety. And I think one of the reasons it's challenging is because we actually use a single term to describe this entire spectrum of experience. So we say, like, oh, I have anxiety about my job interview or that big test or getting results back from my doctor. That is the kind of anxiety that is more situational. And that's something that we are all going to experience at some time or another. We're going to have that kind of pit in our stomach, that anxious worry. So anxiety, sometimes people use it to define it as, as worry, as fear, as uncertainty about the future. And that kind of anxiety is common to all people. But then it stretches all the way to this continuum of mental health and a clinical diagnosis. I had believed that I was just over here like, this is just common. Like I should just get over it. If I just manage it in these ways, then I'll be fine. But I didn't realize that I was actually on this other side where I had generalized anxiety disorder that had been undiagnosed for most of my life. And that came with it a whole host of very physiological implications. And so, in the same way that maybe God made my thyroid to work and do certain functions of my body, sometimes it doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. So it is with our brains and with the chemicals and the hormones in our bodies. Things have gotten off kilter, and there's a lot of reasons for that: experiential, environmental, genetic, family of origin wounds, trauma. Like there's all these things that can cause us to get to that point, but it really is this spectrum.
And what are some of these physiological aspects of anxiety?
Well, some I've already touched on, but it can cause muscle tension. Like I was waking up every day, and actually, looking back now, I didn't know it was at the time when I was a child, but I would complain of debilitating backaches. And I was like a rough and tough kind of tomboy. I'd go out, run through the rose bushes, and come back with blood streaming down my legs, and I wouldn't care. But then at night, I would just cry because my back would hurt. My mom took me to the doctors, and they couldn't figure it out. There's like nothing physically wrong with my back, but my body was physically storing my stress and anxiety. Elevated heart rate. This is actually one that you really have to be careful of because sometimes people, especially if you're having the kind of anxiety that's like a panic attack, you can feel like you're having a heart attack. It affects your heart rate, your blood pressure. But sometimes actual high blood pressure can mimic a similar physiological symptom. If you feel like your heart is out of rhythm or it's always racing, please get checked by your doctor because you could have something like hypertension or something really going on with your heart. Sweaty palms, racing mind, brain fog, fatigue, deep fatigue, that feeling of insomnia, all of these things are affecting our physical bodies, but are a source of something going on in our brains.
And you mentioned the spectrum, how we all experience it, right? And we all may experience some of those physiological symptoms, but it could be more. And if we're not talking to people or trying to understand, we might be living with something that we don't really have to live with, or something that we can live with differently. We can have a different relationship with it because we can get the help that we need. And when we suffer in silence, there's nothing noble about that. Sometimes we think there is. I'm just going to get through it, put on a helmet, shake it off. There's some things you can't shake off. There's some things that stick to you, and that's okay. That's human. And I think having people walk through it with you reminds you that, yeah, one, I'm not alone, and that's
Mhm.
okay. After the pandemic, there were so many studies that said people are dealing with anxiety in record numbers right now because life became ridiculously uncertain. And you're being told every day on the news that you're going to die. Somehow, some way, death is coming for you and it's not going to be pretty. And that's a hard way to live when all you're doing is thinking about your inevitable demise. So anxiety builds and it grows. You start looking to the left and right and people's families and they're fracturing and people that you've trusted are like walking away and all these things are happening around you because life is just so difficult at the moment. And so yeah, we come out of that and we're like, I don't even know how to live. I'm worried about the future. What's going to happen next year? Is there going to be another global pandemic? When's the shoe going to drop? And I think breathing exercises are great. Being in a group of people where you can talk openly is great. But I think what is so important about your story is that you started with honesty to yourself and other people of saying, here's where I am. There's something liberating about being willing to say, here's where I am.
Mhm.
And you're not a time traveler. You can't go back into the past and be like, I'm going to fix everything. No, you can't do that. But you can accept it and be like, okay. So, what does moving forward look like knowing that this has been a part of my life up until this point? And how has your story encouraged other people around you when you lead as that first person to speak, like your friend did for you?
Mhm. Well, every time I talk about anxiety, honestly, whether it's on Instagram or a podcast or just leading a Bible study or meeting a friend for coffee, it comes up because, like you said, so many people are dealing with it in some capacity. And I feel like every time I am just honest, I hear the words back like, I thought I was the only one. Or you put into words something that I have never been able to explain. I've had women email me and being like, I'm sending your article to my husband because I can't explain my anxiety to him, but you just put it into words. And so it just has been that little bit of fuel to be like, okay, this is important. Like, I'm going to keep talking about it because what I wanna pick up on something that you said earlier, which I thought was so important of, like, there is no I don't know what you said exactly, but, like, there's no honor in, like, suffering in silence. I think we can either, like, wear our anxiety like a badge of shame or a badge of pride. Either way, it's not good for our soul. It's not good
No.
for our soul to think that, like, this is my scarlet letter A, and I am marked, and I am therefore disqualified from the goodness of God, relationships, or fill in the blank. Nor is it good to wear it like a badge of pride, to almost take it on as our identity. Like, this is my cross to bear, and this is the most important thing about me. Like, neither of those mentalities are helpful. But what I think is increasingly helpful, and as we think about how do you move through your anxiety, don't stuff it down, don't elevate it, don't minimize it, don't maximize it. Like, how do we healthfully move through it? Honesty and compassion are absolutely key. And so I talk about that a lot in the book. What does it look like to tell God the truth every day? That's how I start my day. God, here's all my emotion. Here's my anxiety. Here's how I'm feeling. I'm not going to hide it. You know it anyway, but I'm going to name it because in naming it, it reduces the power of it. And also I can release it to the Lord. So then I can receive whatever it is that he has for me. Strength, peace, hope, courage for the day.
I remember having a conversation with a coach a while back, and I'm sitting there telling him something I was worried about. And he goes, that's anxiety. And I just remember thinking, oh, really? And he goes, yeah, that's anxiety. And I'm like, huh. Because I was able at that point to see it for what it was.
Mhm.
And I think so many of us are laboring under these false visions of the future. And we're stuck when reality, like that's just a feeling. It feels like reality, but it doesn't have to be. And I love how you said you take this to the Lord because we see that in the Psalms, right? Over and
Mhm.
over and over. The psalmists are coming out and saying, freaking out. This is
Right.
tough. Not a fan. I don't like what's going on. I'm even telling myself because I got this inside track that's going negative, and I'm saying, hope again in God. You're going to taste the goodness of God in the land of the living. It's going to be good, not because circumstances may change, but because the one who holds the circumstances in the palm of his hand, he doesn't change. He loves me. He's got me. He's got my back. When I read the Psalms, I'm reading these people who are basically being open and honest, and not only being open and honest, they're being open and vulnerable about the things that they dread the most for others to sing. That still blows my mind. They're using it as art to impact their neighbor. And we often think no one wants to hear what I'm going through. Not only do they want to hear it, but they need to hear it because they're going through it too. And it might look differently than you, but they are going through it. And so when you see your anxiety for what it is, and then you take it to Jesus, what does that look like?
Vulnerability. It looks like intimacy and relationship. Right now, as I'm recording this, I'm sitting at my desk window at my desk, and I'm looking out my back porch, and I have like a little couch on our back porch. Jesus and I have logged so many hours on that little couch together where I just say, Lord, I have nothing. I literally have nothing to give. I feel like I have nothing to give you except for my fear, my insecurity, my anxiety, my depression. I feel stuck. And I can come because he invites us to. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. What does it look like? Every day I'd wake up and say, Lord, thank you for this day. I want to give you everything that I'm carrying so that I can only take hold of that which you have asked me to. It's a constant. It's not a one and done. It is a constant. Even I've been speaking and talking about this for years. I've done therapy, written this devotional, and still every day it's rehearsing the truth. It's confession. And confession, guys, isn't about a moral failure. It literally means telling the truth. We tell God the truth so that we can receive his truth in return. And it's breathing and meditating on his promises. And it's saying, God, I feel myself. I'm tightening my grip again. Help me to release it to you. And it's just that constant conversation, that invitation, that returning, that fixing our minds on Christ, because he promises, those who fix your thoughts on me, I will keep in perfect peace. And so we just practice over and over and over again, all day long, repeat, repeat, repeat.
So much of confession is just saying, this is where I'm at. It's repeating that acceptance and saying, God, you know this already, but I want you to know that I know that you know this is where I'm at. And I love how you wake up and the first thing you say is, Lord, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found for me, when I do that, it's so weird saying this because I've heard people say this and it always rang untrue for me. And I'm finding in this moment when I'm saying it, it rings so true. This idea of saying, God, thank you for being so faithful in this. Reflecting back on moments where I knew God showed up in a very real way and being like, you got me and you will never leave me nor forsake me. And then all of a sudden, it cuts through that anxiety. And all of a sudden, I'm like, all right, we might just be okay. Today's not going to be so bad. I don't know what's coming. And that's okay. We'll let that work itself out.
That is exactly right. I just want to tell you, I was literally doing that today. There's an area in my life where there's a big old question mark, and uncertainty does not feel comfortable.
I don't like it.
And yet the Lord brought me back to that place of gratitude because I literally was thinking back to 3 specific things that have happened in this last year where in the moment, anxiety producing, things that did not go the way I wanted them to, things that were extremely discouraging, disheartening, felt unfair. Now, even just a few short months later, I was like, thank you, Lord, for closing that door. Thank you, God, that did not work out the way that I wanted because my temporary discomfort was preparation for his perfect provision.
Ooh.
And so in this moment, now that I'm like, no, I don't like what's happening. I'm like, no, Lord, I thank you for this today. It doesn't feel comfortable today. It feels awful. Honestly, I could cry. It feels awful. And I will thank God for it today because I can trust, because we look back and give thanks, I can trust that this is the pathway to deeper intimacy with him and receiving everything he has for me going forward.
Come on, Becky. We need to pass the plate because we're having church. I think at the end of the day, that is so important. I had that experience this morning. I'm walking to my coffee shop and I'm just kind of in that thought of, ooh. And then I was just like, God, thank you. And I wasn't trying to be all churchy either. I just reflected on it. naturally. And I was like, I'm going to invite you into this. And I got excited. And I love also what you said about I wake up in the morning and I thank God, that step one. But also when we wake up in the morning, that's generally when there's like a full frontal assault on everything that is good within us. Like every negative thought that I can muster, it's like my best stuff. It's in the mornings. Right when I open my eyes, I'm like, the world is dying. It's
Right.
like,
Right. It's too much. Like, let's just pretend that it's not happening. We can't even get out of bed because it's just so awful. Yes.
and that's why this idea of realizing that God's faithfulness and compassion is new every morning, we can rest in that no matter where we are, what we're thinking, that may not be the truest thing about us in that moment. And who God is for us can ultimately change our day. I love it. You're like, all right, God, thank you. And that thankfulness does cut through. But sometimes we think, I'm just going to keep a gratitude journal. Maybe that doesn't get us to where we are. But I do love the idea of shifting the conversation,
Mhm.
changing the track. If this is occupying most of my mental space, what do I know to be true? Anxiety tells me all the things that I don't know that are actually going to happen. And I spend so much time worrying about things that may never happen. Well, how do I actually say, okay, but what is happening? What can I worry about now? And then sometimes when I do it, not every time, but sometimes when I do it, I actually just forget about the thing I was worried about. Not every time,
Yeah.
sometimes. And so we're talking about the negative aspects of anxiety, right? There's a plethora of negative aspects of anxiety, but how can it be a good thing? That's my question.
Yeah. It's a challenging question to ask with a challenging answer, but I think that it can actually be a good thing. In the introduction of the book, I call out anxiety as a gift, which I would not have said many years ago, but it has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. Not something I would have written into my own story, but I can call it a gift because anything that becomes a vehicle for deeper dependence on and intimacy with Jesus is a gift. And so we can choose to allow anxiety to be a wedge between us and the Lord, or we can allow it to be a bridge. And so you have to ask yourself today, is it going to be a wedge? Is it going to keep me from God? Or is it going to be a bridge and just like getting right to the heart? So that first is one way I would say it is a good thing in my life because unlike anything else, well, maybe motherhood, maybe marriage, those are hard too. But I am desperate for Jesus. Like I cannot do this on my own. The second thing of many that I would say is something that you talk about all the time, Raleigh, compassion. It has grown in me compassion, first for myself and then for others. The Bible says, love others as you love yourself. And
Right.
so learning to treat myself with compassion, with gentleness, to eradicate those negative tapes in my head has changed the way that I interact with others and how I see others and the compassion. And I can fill in the blanks for other people's stories. Like they might look fine, but there's probably a whole lot going on below the surface. And that's a gift that I wouldn't trade.
You mentioned family of origin things. Like so many of us, we may have this unchecked perfectionism. And what we don't know is that, yeah, it drives anxiety because you got to be perfect. And if you're not perfect, what will happen? No one will love you. The beautiful thing is when I've fallen flat on my face, I realized there were still people that loved me.
Mhm.
And that was such a gracious gift because then all of a sudden I'm like, I don't have to do anything for these people. They just love me. And that makes you live differently when you realize you're dealing with house money. What I've found with perfectionism is when you're laboring under that, it overflows. Right.
Mhm.
But like what you said is also true when you're kind to yourself. When you're like, you know what? I don't have to hit a bullseye. I just want to get on the board. Forget the board. The wall seems nice. Let me hit the wall. We can paint over that or put a little toothpaste in there. It'll be all right. But you got to love the cheap fix. I think it's okay if you don't knock it out of the park all the time. When you start being kinder to yourself, being more gentle with yourself, this magical thing happens. It overflows into how you treat others. Instead of trying to crucify someone for something they said or did, you're able to say, hey, are you good? How are you? What's going on? You don't even have to focus on that thing that happened. You just be like, well, how are you? And they'll be so thrown off that you are actually asking about them and not the thing that they did. They won't know what to do. And it is disarming to love someone for who they are, not what they do. But I
Yeah.
think that's kind of the thing that we all want.
Right. And I think it also, in addition to that, as we move about this world with more self compassion and compassion for others, it's contagious. Just the
Right.
same way that offense and rage and anger and anxiety, those things are contagious, so too is compassion. I have chosen to be very intentional about being honest and vulnerable with my children. I think as parents, we can often feel like, oh, I need to be strong. I don't want to be a burden on them. Well, we can have open, honest conversations about things as important as mental health without being a burden on our kids. And so, sure, there are some times where I go in my bathroom and I cry closed door tears, but there's also times that I cry at the dinner table. And I can just say, they'll be like, "Mommy, like, what's wrong?" And I'm like, sometimes I can name it, sometimes I can't. That's really frustrating about anxiety, but I've even gotten more comfortable in that discomfort. And I just say, guys, I'm not even quite sure. I'm having a lot of anxiety right now. And sometimes, God has made tears as a physical release for emotional tension. And I'm really filled up right now. My mind is really full. My heart is really full. And it's coming out in these tears. It has taught my sons compassion. That when they were little, my little one would grab a tissue and be like, "Mommy, I'll wipe your tears." And now they're all teenagers. And I hope and pray that this emotional education from their very emotional mother will serve them well as the young men and the men that God has created them to be, for the women that they will one day hopefully marry, or people that they will work with, that we will be able to move about this world as more compassionate people and to really live out Christ's call that we can comfort others with the comfort we ourselves have received. And that is also a gift of anxiety.
It starts at home, right? I love what you said about closing the door in the bathroom and crying, which almost sounds like you're lying because I've never met a parent who was able to actually lock the bathroom door. Every one of them is like, no, 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 no. They just walk in. I don't know how they pick locks. They're going to be master thieves, but they get in every
That
time.
has also been true. Yes.
It's like, I just need a moment. And then they find their way in. And yeah, it's like Ocean's 11 in the bathroom. It's very wild. But you reminded me when I was in seminary, I was talking with one of my friends from Minnesota. He's a real masculine guy. And I'm looking at his DVDs because that's when I was in seminary. And he had Moulin Rouge. I looked at him and I'm like, Moulin Rouge, really? And he goes, without skipping a beat, dude, sometimes you need a good cry. Like real deadpan. And I'm like,
That's awesome.
that was the most emotionally healthy thing he could have said. Because we want to just say, everyone jump on my shoulders. I got this. I am impenetrable. Nothing can stop me. And I think realizing our fragility is a massive step towards health. It's saying, nah, I can't do this on my own. I need sometimes to break down so that I can reassess and focus on what's going on. I need to feel my feelings. I hate it when coaches or counselors will tell people that because they'll be like, you need to feel your feelings. I'm like, but that hurts. There's a reason we don't feel those things. But that's how we navigate it. We've got to face where we are. And I love how you're not afraid or ashamed to use that as a teaching moment of, yeah, sometimes mommy cries. And that's not a deficiency in you. That's actually a ridiculously human thing. And we all deal with our emotions differently, but it's good to feel all of them: happy, sad,
Mhm.
anxious, bored, whatever emotion you're feeling, feel it. This is where I'm at. Now, where do I want to go? And I think that presence of mind, that's a beautiful thing. And so I love how you can see anxiety as an opportunity because a lot of us just see it as a brick wall. But how else do you see anxiety as an opportunity?
It's so funny that you talk about perfectionism because I actually talk about that quite a bit in the book because I too am a recovering, not only perfectionist, but a people pleaser with performance issues. I
There it
call it
is.
the triple P, and so much of my life I lived feeling like and really believing and operating out of the mindset of that my value is based on what I do and what I produce and what other people think about it. And of course, there's lots of strengths to that. Like I'm a high achiever, but it is not a good way to operate in my soul. And so anxiety has been a gift because it has made me face my very real limitations at times. There was a whole year where like Anxiety reared its ugly head. I thought it was going to be like this phenomenal year. And the Lord basically was like, Becky, I'm trying to save you from burnout and breakdown. But you've got to partner with me by hitting pause and hitting it fast and hard. And I had to scale back every non negotiable thing in my life. And that year, I dubbed it my year of naps. I took more naps that year than any other time because my nervous system, I had been living on adrenaline. I had adrenal fatigue. My cortisol was out of whack. Like I had insomnia, and I would hit a brick wall. I was like a computer with too many tabs open, and it was like, force the shutdown. Like, you cannot keep operating. Your wheels are just spinning. And that was one of the greatest gifts of my life because it was in that year that I felt so weak and so face to face with my limitations that I experienced the presence of God in a way that I had never had before, even though I had walked with him closely for decades. That really is the greatest gift, that when we recognize our desperate need for Jesus and the fact that he is already right there, he's just waiting for us to see his fingerprints. He's waiting for us to recognize his nearness. He's waiting for us, again, in that picture of Matthew 11:28-30, take my yoke upon you. It's that hitching ourselves to Christ. Will I tether myself to him so that his voice is the loudest in my ear? When there's two oxen side by side, like, that's the picture of a yoke. Two animals like being tethered together by a wooden crossbeam. And guess what? If you are yoked to Christ, are you going to hear his voice? Yes. Are you going to follow his ways? Yes. Do I have to learn to surrender to his pace? Yes. And that is a gift. And that's what anxiety has done for me.
I love that because it puts you where you need to be, even if it doesn't feel like that in the moment. You talked about calming our nervous system. How do we calm our nervous system, and why is that important?
Yeah. So that's another reason why therapy is awesome, because it will teach you those tools. But it's important to calm our nervous system because we can get stuck in fight or flight or freeze. Our body is trying to protect itself, which is a good thing. But sometimes we can stay in that state for too long. We have to get back to this point of calm. There's actually something called our window of tolerance. When you're in the center of that window, your parasympathetic nervous system is like, I'm grounded. Stress is going to come in. It's okay. I can deal with it. This uncertainty, that's okay. And you stay within your window and you can cope and manage and work through and stay in a centered, calm place. But if you bump outside your window of tolerance, you can go into what's either called hyperarousal or hypoarousal. Hyperarousal is when those feelings of anxiety kick in, that elevated heart rate, that racing mind. Hypoarousal, when you're below your window of tolerance, more of those depressive feelings kick in, where it's hard to get out of bed, no motivation, no joy. We have to care about our nervous systems to recognize when that's happening and get back in that window. God made our bodies amazing. Like, even just our very breath has the ability to trigger a nervous system response and calm ourselves. So something as simple as, it's called box breathing or square breathing. You just intentionally pause and breathe in slowly for 4 counts. Hold it for 4 counts. Exhale slowly for 4 and hold for 4. You do that as many times as it takes to realize that the tension in your neck is reducing, your heart rate is going down. And that has been like just such a simple but powerful. My kids now joke, they're like, Mom, do you need to breathe? You need a deep breath? And I'm like, yes, I do. Yes, I do need a deep breath. Thank you very much. But like, it's so powerful. And in their anxious moments or when they're wound up, I'll be like, we're just going to breathe. And they think it's ridiculous. They also know that it works because it really does. And so I incorporate that in the Anniversary Day for the Anxious Soul, incorporating that power of breath with the power of truth. And so we incorporate breath with inhaling truth and exhaling our trust. That scripture meditation coupled with the power of breath prayer and breathing has been a game changer. And I do it every day because I need it every day.
Well, I'm excited about your book because this is a daily reflection. This is something you can go to every day. It's that reset. It's that refocus. It's that opportunity to bring your nervous system before the Lord and to rest in him. And in these last moments, do you have any encouragement that you think we need to hear today? Is there anything that is kicking around your mind right now that you're like, I want to leave this with them?
I would love to leave you with my 2 favorite questions that I ask the Lord every day. This is good for all the time, but especially if you are in a season of high stress or overwhelm or anxiety, or you're feeling stuck or discouraged, ask God simply, what do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? What do you want me to know in this moment about this heaviness that I feel? What do you want me to know, Lord, about the fact that all I can think about is all of the terrible what ifs of the future? God, what do you want me to know? See, sometimes we can come to God with our whys. Why is this happening? Why is this unfair? Why do I have cancer? Why do I have anxiety? And God's not obligated to tell us why. But as his children, he will always tell us what he wants us to know about the thing we are going through. So I just invite you to come to him. First, confess. Tell him the truth so that you can empty yourself so that you are open to receive. And then just say, God, today, like, what do you want me to know? And then you can say, okay, and now what do you want me to do? The world can be overwhelming. Parenting, marriage, singleness, your career, your relationships, your health, your mental health, your physical health. Like, there's so many things. And so sometimes my brain, all the open tabs, it's like, what do I do next? No, God, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to know about my anxiety? When I've asked him that question, sometimes the answer is like, I want you to go back to therapy, or I want you to cut out caffeine, or I want you to just come and sit on your back porch and listen to the birds. That's all. That's all. Just sit and listen. So just ask him, friends, simply, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to do? Just listen, make space for that today. You will find rest for your soul in him.
Wow. Thank you. And thanks for being on today. Those last 2 questions really gave me something to think about. I wrote them down while you were talking. I was like, okay, we're adding this to the daily thing. This is going to be good. So, Becky, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for the work that you do and for having these honest conversations and making this a more compassionate world. Appreciate you.